It's almost Halloween, and what better subject to color than glowing jack-o'-lanterns? This is a tiny fragment from my full university level art course on fantasy glow effects, where I cover such topics as bioluminescence, magical potions, lanterns and candles, and even glowing fairies. So enjoy the show and consider taking the full course.
This is an interesting kind of a light effect. We're going to have two glow effects here. We're going to have the candle burning from within, and we're going to have a spooky bluish green light that's shining all around the pumpkin. This is a very common fantasy art effect that you will often see in video games and that you will often see in fantasy illustrations and fantasy paintings. Imagine that this is part of a bigger scene and there are probably other things that are lurking around that are glowing. For Halloween, the main colors that I like for fantasy effects are purple, green, and orange. And black, of course. But definitely purple glow, green glow, and orange for all the pumpkins and the candles. Those three colors will have all of your Halloween coloring covered. Again with the Q-tip for that smudge. The point of the white on the periphery isn't to get rid of the outlines, because the outlines don't bother us on this at all, since the background is so dark. The adding background and bringing it all the way to the edges of the pumpkin pretty much took care of those outlines for us. Plus, the pumpkin itself isn't glowing. We just have some glow effects on it and in it. Go as dark as you can possibly go. So starting with brown, feel free to start with a really dark brown. I'm going with sienna brown, and I'm going to color pretty much all of the pumpkin with the sienna brown, but now adding quite a bit of texture to it. So generally the way that I'm coloring is that I'm making the center of the area that I'm coloring even darker than the rest of it. Now I'm going over with the most pumpkin orange that you can find. Like, think classical Halloween colors. Going over all the brown. Why did we add all of this brown undertone? Because it's dark outside. Because we need to treat this pumpkin as if he exists in the dark. And secondary to all that, he will have some light sources from within and from without. But he wouldn't be his pure natural orange color. He would be a little bit darker because it's actually dark outside. So we're going in with our lighter and lighter colors, and there's always a little bit of an overlap. And so now I'm coming in with my canary yellow, and my canary yellow is going creeping in even further to the center of that eye socket, but I'm also spilling into the orange a little bit. There's always that overlap. And I've given you some guidance with the lines there, with the actual cutouts of the eyes, not just for colors, although it happens to be this way, that every outline inside the eye is a new color. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It just so happened because I wanted to give him depth, to show how deep the core of the pumpkin really is. So at this point, I colored everything yellow, and I left just the little tea light on the bottom, pure white. And this is my favorite effect is coming in with my deep purple, my dark purple, my favorite Prismacolor pencil. I mentioned in the last lesson how much I like using it for shadows, and this is a classic example of this. Even though this is an orange pumpkin, look at how much of it we're covering with other colors. We started with brown. Of course, we're adding all the beautiful candlelight colors, the oranges and the yellows. But now I'm covering almost the entire head with deep purple. That is ludicrous. That is not at all the color of the pumpkin. This pumpkin isn't purple, so why are we doing that? We're adding that contrast. We're adding those areas that are overwhelmed with the light that's on the side of it. That's another thing that happens to us just visually, the way that we perceive objects. If you have an object here and you have a light source next to it, all of a sudden this will look a lot darker just because of the light source next to it. And especially if we have it behind. Remember Cathedral Cats, this tutorial. The Cathedral Cats' little faces became almost black because they were backlit by the cathedral light. So here we have a character that's lit from within, which is pretty much the same as being backlit. The snout area is backlit. The light is literally behind this piece of the pumpkin core. So it looks a lot darker to us, not just because it's dark outside, but also because of that contrast with the light. So we have to bring in all these colors that aren't really natural. Bring in your most obnoxious neon orange. Go as crazy as you want with this because we want this pumpkin to glow, glow, glow. So I'm bringing in my super bright orange in that transition area from purple to yellow. And now my original natural pumpkin color is almost entirely gone. This is all fantasy colors. And as I'm blending, I keep going back and forth. This is what we talked about on candles. I keep going back and forth, adjusting colors. So it's not just light to dark or dark to light. Keep bringing those colors back. Notice how much work goes into it. And remember that this took a lot longer than what you're seeing on your screens. I am speeding through some parts of it. I'm cutting through some parts of it. This pumpkin took about 2 hours for me to color from start to finish. So don't try to rush this. Pause and catch up on these effects. Make sure that they're smooth. And don't limit yourselves. You know, if you already did yellow, orange, and purple, it doesn't mean that you can't come back with your yellow if more yellow is needed. Wouldn't work without the white primer. You know I'm going to say that. But to me, this is a really proper classical fantasy effect. Is having this jade green glow that's landing on top of an object that's a completely unrelated color. You know, we have a dark, deep orange pumpkin with this light green glow. Who would ever think of doing that? And if that wasn't enough, I want to give the green glow a little bit of variation as well. So I'm actually going to have my glow a little bit more turquoise on the top, a little bit more green on the bottom. I am blending my actual glow color with the color of the pumpkin, but notice that the gradient transition is very sharp. We've had some smooth gradient transitions. We've had some very wide gradient transitions in the past. You know, the candlelight is a very gradual gradient transition, but here it's very sharp. It's like blue, brown, very little variation in between. There's still a gradient transition there. It's not a solid line, so I'm still smudging a little bit, but the color change is very sudden. We're going from this pure, very, very light in color, but very strong in saturation, blue and jade green, and we're going straight into that dark color of the pumpkin. But you can take it even further. You can keep adding this blue to actually change the color of the pumpkin if you want. If you want to keep making it darker, that's an option. You can go over the whole thing with this color because at this point, it's not going to actually introduce a light blue into the pumpkin face. It's actually going to change your existing colors because of how many layers we've already added. And it's only because of all these layers that this effect is even possible. But look how cool that is. Don't you just love it? I love it. I think it's an amazing, amazing effect to have this kind of a blue-green hair light to our pumpkin. It's very different. It's very unusual. And it clearly screams fantasy glow effect. With this black now, I have full control over just how high contrast the pumpkin is. And of course, the darker we go on the face, the brighter those lights look. We didn't do anything magical with the eyes. We didn't do anything magical with the mouth. It's just a transition from orange to yellow to white. That's it. I decided to keep working with my red. I keep adding this pure red to increase my glow. And look how beautifully that's working. He is obnoxiously shiny. Does your pumpkin need to be this high contrast and have this much pure red in him? He does not. He does not. I'm taking this a little bit on the extreme side of things. An orange glow would have been perfectly fine, but apparently I wasn't content with that, so I'm taking it even further. It's hard to stop once you get going with these glow effects, but also remember that the more layers you add, the smoother your coloring is. So here you have options. Originally, my plan was to have this tea light that's just on the base of the candle, and it was going to be just the pure oval on the bottom, and that's one option. You can leave it at that, leave just the tea light. But I decided that that wasn't enough, so I added more white to the bottom to have the light spill out. And I'm going to go for that effect that I described earlier, where the light source is so strong on the inside that it's almost like one big orb of light on the inside that we're also seeing through the eyes as well as through the mouth. But in order to achieve that, I need to add a lot more white to both the eyes and the mouth. So I'm going to keep doing that, but notice that it's not solid white. I'm adding my white ink and I'm smushing it with a Q-tip so that some of the yellow is still seen through. This is tricky. Some of you will hate doing this. It's easy to ruin it at this stage. It's a dangerous word to say during class, but it's true. I'm very used to doing this, adding ink and then adding with my Q-tip, like using a Q-tip almost as a paintbrush. I would recommend practicing this before you try it on something that you just spent 2 hours coloring. Don't jump straight into this because it's a very personal technique and it's a technique that took a few years to master. The easiest way, the surest way to do this is with a brush, with acrylic paint and brush, or your white Prismacolor pencil will absolutely do the trick as well. If you're feeling brave and you do have the Copic nail polish thingy, this is one way to do it. But remember that for me, this was an afterthought. So entirely up to you, but do be careful with that white pigment, because if you're using the Copic nail polish thingy, that Q-tip trick is a very advanced maneuver, very advanced indeed. Do try it on a scrap paper first.